Sonke Saru, which, as you all know, is Japanese for Achtung, Achtung! My name's Al Murray, and you're listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk, the podcast all about the Second World War. After 3 hard weeks of conflict in London, our tanks have rolled westward as we've opened a new front in the battle-scarred villages and hedgerows of Wiltshire, particularly testy Bocage, otherwise known as home to my regular podcast partner, historian James Holland. What have you been up to since I last saw you, James?
Well, I've been finishing off my Normandy book, and I've actually been out to Normandy as well, doing a little bit of telly out there.
Lovely.
And a little bit of a recce, and we were doing some B-roll, which is, you know, those sort of general views, and just motoring around and seeing stuff that I hadn't seen. So I went to Onderfontein.
Oh.
It's a little village on a hill, one of those places that's kind of minor battle, but if you were involved in it, it was a major battle.
Yeah.
And Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry and a local battalion to me, the 4th Dorsets, and, you know, a terrible place to fight. But boy, is it beautiful. I mean, my goodness, what a lovely
When you go to
lovely
Normandy, do you do what I do and, you know, have a plate of the tripe de Caen and get into the cider?
More of a Calvados man myself,
Right, okay.
actually. I really love the Calvados.
Excellent, because I do really like, and it's one of the things the food in Normandy is particularly good.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the healthiest, but it's just fantastic, isn't it?
Plastered.
Anyway, how about you? What have you been up to?
Well, I'm completing my writing and learning and honing is a terrible word. My new stand-up show. So I've been sort of bolting bits on, and it's been a week of going, actually, I need to write a bit about this. Bite the bullet and write a jihadi bride joke.
and the B word?
Well, there's lots of B word in it. And I did a preview the other night, and I think what's quite interesting is some of the mood on the B word seems to be changing, which is quite interesting. Is that there was always someone who'd go, "Oh, come off it," if you did a joke about Brexit, and now that they seem to have gone quiet. But there we go. You know, fail to plan to fail. Anyway, a reminder of our format, ladies and gents. Frankly, it couldn't be any simpler. In each episode, we'll explore a physical thing from the Second World War and try to tell its backstory. We've already looked at a piece of Spitfire wing, a German machine gun, and a German radio. And we'll revisit a forgotten thing or person from the war, maybe an event or battle that slipped out of sight, but we believe is a story worth telling. Plus, we're going to answer as many of your questions as we can. We'll use the hashtag #WeHaveWays on Twitter. And actually, we put some questions out the other day, and we've had some very, very interesting stuff come to us. So let's get started. Brian Spurgeon on Twitter, because these are questions on Twitter on the hashtag #WeHaveWays. Why exactly was it a bridge too far? I mean, heavens.
Because they got the others, but not that one.
Well, yes, yeah. Because the scene famously is Dirk Bogarde on his balcony once Sean Connery, Roy Urquhart has returned from Arnhem, says, "Well, I think maybe we went a bridge too far, chaps." And we're all supposed to think, what an insouciant wanker he is, and it's all his fault and all this sort of thing. But there is a school of thought, and I think it's in I can't remember which book it is, whether it's William Buckingham's book about Arnhem, which is very, very good, about Market Garden, not just about Arnhem, or whether it's in Seb Ritchie's book Myth and Reality. And we're in James's man cave. It would imply that there'd be paintings in here, daubings on the wall, but in fact there's about 1,000 books. I'm looking at this wall of books here, some of which I've got, some of which I've read, some of which I know my father's got, some of which have gone to the great second-hand bookstore. I mean, there's an Oxfam round the corner from where I live, which is the best stock military history library in West London. I don't know that they sell any of them on. Anyway, and Seb Ritchie's book there, Arnhem, Myth and Reality, which is a fantastic dissection of, and the myth is the myth busting in that book, for want of a better expression, is really, really good. And I think it's him that says, because the original one of the Arnhem options they looked at was the Vassal, which is the crossing they did the following year in Operation Varsity.
And if I remember rightly, Dempsey favoured that.
That's right.
He was commander of Second Army, British Second Army.
That's right. And you turn right rather than go up.
So it wasn't quite so far to go, and it was, and there were only 2 bridges, not 3. And
and so there's a school of thought that says maybe that's what they meant by that is what we've got is the muscle to do 2 major river crossings, but not 3, and that the 3rd bridge is the bridge too far. And
And the problem is river crossings. I mean, these are not small rivers.
No.
First of all, I mean, this is not like, I don't know, crossing the Avon at Salisbury. I mean, it's a completely different caliber. These are big, wide, major thoroughfares of water.
Yeah.
And you've got to get across them. And, you are a mechanically driven, very heavy army, and you've got to get across these somehow.
Yeah.
And you're being canalised onto the bridges, which is your access point to get across them. Otherwise, you're stuffed. So you've got to get to them and capture the bridge intact, then get across. And obviously, these are nodal points.
Yeah.
And if you're defending something, what do you want to defend? You want to defend crossroads, railways, marshalling yards, bridges. I mean, these are all points which force your enemy to converge on a certain point, which is why they're so crucial.
Because the river at Wesel is incredibly. It's the Rhine proper. It's not the Niederrhein. It's not, because what happens in Holland is the Rhine.
It's big Rhine.
It's big mainstream Rhine, as it were. And
it's the Rhine that's been straightened in the end of the 18th century.
Exactly. And you go see it, and it's those enormous barges going up the river with the water going over their bows, because they're so laden down with their goods on the way up to Rotterdam or whatever. And that's a serious obstacle.
Yep.
But of course, and in 45 they successfully captured it with an airborne landing, which which opinion is very much divided on whether that was even necessary at all, because the Germans were beat supposedly, and also that was staged as a major river crossing with amphibious vehicles, with all sorts of, treated as an amphibious landing rather than a bridge hopping exercise.
And it's also worth pointing out that a lot of bridges have already been destroyed by the Allies, and they've also been destroyed by the Germans.
Yeah. Because
the Germans need to be able to, to stay ahead of that bridge. They need a bridge so they can get across it. But obviously, the moment they no longer got that territory, they're going to blow it up. So there's a sort of huge race on. So it's not like you can sort of concurrently converge on 6 bridges all in a kind of 10-mile stretch or something, because all the others have gone. There's always only one in that particular stretch.
Well, a Market Garden runs into a real problem immediately, because the bridge at the Son's blown, and
there's the whole crossing of the Vaal and all the rest.
The whole
of it,
thing falls apart.
Which the 82nd Airborne do. I mean, it's just an amazing operation.
So why exactly was it a bridge too far, Brian? We hope we've answered your question there. Because it is the concise reply. An additional question: what's the largest capacity? What's interesting is war films have featured in these questions, and understandably. Because for lots of people, that's their first point of contact with history, with Second World War history.
Which is why I kind of get so depressed when I watched. I mean, I really enjoyed Dunkirk, and I really enjoyed Darkest Hour as a movie, but as a kind of piece of history, you just sort of go, why couldn't you just get that right?
Get that right, actually, yeah. And so an additional question, which sort of tags onto that, is what's the largest capacity magazine fired in any war movie?
Well, must win by a substantial margin has got to be Clint Eastwood and his
Infinite
MP40, his Schmeisser out of the bus at the back of the end of Where Eagles Dare. Although, having said that, Tom Hardy's Spitfire in Dunkirk must be quite high.
Well, he has about...
I counted at least 75 seconds.
Right.
Of film time of him firing his guns without replenishing them, when obviously it was only 14.7 seconds, as everyone knows.
Well, there we go.
Everyone knows.
I mean, I think in a way, Clint's MP40 is like a metaphor for Allied material preponderance.
Yeah, I used to do a PhD in that.
And then,
Oh, we got another one here.
Yeah.
The guns of Navarone got to have been the same size as a Gustav and Dora gun, says Et in Arcadia datum est Atticum. That's a name and a half.
It is, isn't it? Your brother would know.
Well, actually, maybe, because the Gustav and Dora guns were these totally pointless and stupid guns that were 31.5 inches diameter, caliber, or that's 80 centimeters. So that's best part of a meter. That's a muzzle that is, best part of a meter.
Good God.
I mean, that is just insane. And they required something like 4,500 men to man them. I mean, it is the most ridiculous thing ever. And only one of them, I think, ever fired once on the siege of Sebastopol.
How much charge would you need in to fire a shell?
Ludicrous amounts. And by the time they're being used in operation in the summer of 1942 in the Crimea against Sebastopol, the Germans are just really short of everything. Yeah. So if you're really short of everything, do you think it's a good idea to build the world's largest railway gun? I mean, I would argue possibly not. Also, they used gas. It's the only time gas was used in anger in the Second World War was at the Siege of Sebastopol.
Really?
In summer of 1942. Yeah, the Germans used gas on the Russians.
And did the Russians didn't reply in kind?
No, but quite a lot of them died.
Fascinating. I did not know that. And was that that wasn't fired from this gun?
No, it wasn't. No. No. I don't know how it's fired.
Okay. We just need to take a short break now to check our iron rations. We'll be back in a moment. Now, we've a question that actually tips us nicely into the thing I want to talk about today, which is many films have been made. Scarlon on Twitter says, many films have been made about various aspects and missions, true and fictional, of World War II. And Guns N' Navarone, of course, is a fictional story. And,
yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you had to make a World War II film, what would it be about?
Well, I am trying to make a World War II film as it happens. It's based on a novel I wrote 12 years ago called A Pair of Silver Wings, and that follows the fortunes of a guy who's a fighter pilot in the Second World War, and he's in England and then Malta and then northern Italy, and it's told partly from the wartime perspective and partly from 1995, the 50th anniversary of the Second World War, as an old man, he's having to sort of come to terms with what happened to him, the trauma of what happened to him back in the war. It's sort of journey of redemption in many ways. So I am kind of doing that, but God, I give so many to choose from.
Well, you see, because the one that I would posit, I would put forward now is from Normandy in 1944, Overlord, and it's a guy called Tim Roseveare.
Yes,
and the antics that because they're antics. And this is the thing is obviously one of the things I always as I've grown up, I've realised what you've got to do is you've got to pull away from the boy's own aspect of this thing and look at it seriously and take it very, very seriously. But this story is as sort of boy's own as anything that you...
So this is our forgotten thing.
This is our forgotten thing, yeah.
Right,
so,
okay.
Well, because Major Tim Roseveare is in 3 Squadron RE, Royal Engineers. He's a sapper. And his job is to blow some bridges on the Allied left flank, so in the eastern Normandy,
over the River Dee.
Over the River Dee. So you've got,
which is, you're right, completely forgotten about.
Yeah, and the reason it's forgotten about is because of Pegasus Bridge and the Merville Battery.
Okay, so what is going on here is. This is really important, and I think it's one of the most important things about D-Day. Everyone always bangs on about kind of, God, they should have got to Caen on day one. Actually, the most important thing is that you secure the bridges over the River Orne and the Caen Canal, which are immediately to the east of Caen, and immediately to the east of Sword Beach, the furthest easternmost of the landing beaches.
Yep.
Then there is some high ground, which is called the Breville Ridge.
Yep.
You want to hold that high ground, and then it drops down again into the Dee Valley. So there's a whole load of bridges, which the airborne troops have got to destroy so that the Germans then can't get across them.
Yeah.
So they can access their ridge, hold that flank, but the Germans can't come and get at them crossing the River Dee very easily.
And that's 6 Airborne's job on D-Day. And of course,
everyone... And it's vital.
And everyone remembers Pegasus Bridge. Everyone remembers that. It's in the longest day. I mean, again, as you know, war films point of historical contact with people's imagination.
And then Lord Lovat, so they had this very overstrong 3rd Division full of commandos, which put it up to about 23,000 men, I think, from 16,000.
Yep.
And everyone sort of goes, well, why didn't you just shove some of those up towards getting Caen? It's because getting Caen's not the most important thing. The most important thing is securing your flanks. If you can't secure your flanks, you can't then link up your bridgehead from all the beaches and push forward. So it's absolutely essential.
But it's double, isn't it? You can't get out if you don't secure the bridges, and they can't get in if you don't secure the bridges. So it's got a double purpose.
Yes,
because the Caen Canal and Orme bridges are. I mean, they're only what 3-4 miles from the coast, aren't they?
Yes. So about 3 miles inland. Yeah,
it's 3 miles inland. So if
South.
if you're the Germans counterattacking, you can get across those bridges. You can get right up inside the landing and disrupt the landing
totally.
Whereas if you're the Allies and you've secured those bridges and the high ground, you can actually carry on unmolested on that beach and get on with loading men and loading kit and loading gear.
Absolutely.
And there's a port, of course, at Weestrum, ish. So you've got.
But the big point is then getting that highland, which is Breville Ridge. And the reason you always want highland is because if you've got the highland, then you can see stuff.
Yeah.
And you can put guns behind it, and you can have an OP, an observation post, and you can sit down there, and you can, from Breville Ridge, you could, in theory, put your guns behind it, have OPs on the top of that, fire down onto Sword Beach, onto Caen, onto
direct naval fire.
Everywhere.
In fact, so you
can do anything you like. So you really want to have that high ground. And again, the high ground, if the Germans had it, would work in their favour. Whereas it's a double plus for the British if they've got the high ground, because they can look down on any Germans trying to advance and trying to get across the Dive or come round from the Bugabus Ridge further to the south.
Yeah. So 6th Airborne's job is to secure this flank, and we all know about Pegasus Bridge, which is incredibly a brilliant...
Gliders coming in.
Yeah, incredibly
6
glamorous.
Gliders, one goes missing, but the other 5 get there.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, Horsa Bridge is the one that no one talks about, which is they do the same a mile up the road, or half a mile up the road. There's the second bridge. And then you've got the Maryville Battery action, which is very famous because 150 guys get to the rendezvous that 600 are supposed to make, and they put the attack in anyway, and half of them are killed or injured, and it's all... But meanwhile, there's this second set of bridges and rivers and water obstacles that have to be addressed.
And arguably, they are of greater strategic and tactical importance, because the Orme Bridge, even if they had collapsed, the Caen Canal there is not very wide, and nor is the River Orne, and you could have bridged that comparatively quickly. I mean, it's a massive help it not being blown up, but it's not completely disastrous. But had the bridges over the Dive been intact,
it's access to the high ground that's actually possibly
then could troops from 15th Army, which borders at that point the next German army along, and 21st Panzer, if they could have come across the River Dive, then we'd have been in big trouble.
Yeah.
So actually, I would argue that those bridges across the Dive, it's more important that they're blown, probably, than that Pegasus and Horsa are captured.
So the plan is, sappers are dropped in, their gears, there's some dynamite and stuff in gliders and in dropped supplies. There's a company of infantry from Alistair Pearson's battalion, who 8 Power, I think, who are supposed to accompany these engineers to these bridges on the Dive and the Bure. And
incidentally, great story about Pearson.
Well,
I'll just quickly interject. Over Sicily.
Yeah.
You know this one?
Of course I do.
Of course you do. Okay. Okay, well, anyone who's listening who doesn't know this, so he's going across, and the pilot of the Dakota gets the willies, decides he doesn't like the sound of it, and turns around, and he goes, turn back. And he goes, no, it's far too dangerous. And he goes, turn back. And he says, if you and he points a gun at him, and he goes, if you shoot me, you won't be able to land. And he goes, we're paratroopers, we don't need to land.
That's right. Yeah, that story's got so many bolt-ons as well, because there's the story that one of his paratroopers had trained as a pilot or something. There's that element where so I'll get one of my boys to fly the plane anyway. Yeah. So anyway, so that's the measure of Pearson.
Exactly.
So the plan is they're dropped, and of course they're dropped at midnight. A great deal of the land around there is flooded. To create a water obstacle against parachute landings. So the drop zones have been picked very carefully. But you have the problem of bad weather. You have the problem of and not to do anyone down. You've not necessarily got the best aircrew in Transport Command, and also that at this end it's Bomber Command repurposed aircraft. So you've got people going out the holes in Sterlings and Albemarles and all that sort of thing. So what you've got is there's a plan, and of course the thing about Pegasus Bridge is that's actually the only bit of the Allied airborne plan, British airborne plan, that goes according to plan on the night. Absolutely everything else requires improvisation, requires people...
Massive rejig,
people figuring out where they are, what they're doing, how they get some people together. And Roosevelt is the perfect example of this. So he lands in the wrong drop zone, 5 miles from where he should be. Takes him a while to realise this, figures it out, thinks, right, well, I don't have this company of infantry who's supposed to accompany me. What am I going to do? Pulls some people together and sets off on foot to start with for these bridges. And he gets a couple of miles and then thinks, this isn't working. What am I going to do? So he commandeers a jeep from some medics with a trailer. He throws all the medical equipment.
Has that been parachuted out, or has that come down in a glider?
That's come down in a glider. They couldn't parachute drop jeeps at this point. So everything major, everything basically bigger than a guy, and bigger than a mortar
has come
or
by
a
Horsa.
Has come by Horsa glider and landed somewhere, you know, and obviously you tended to have landing zones and dropping zones, so you don't get congestion with the air plan, and so you don't get, you know, people being run over by gliders.
Right.
So you all the gear's in the wrong place, the people in the wrong place, and he assembles a group of people, sends a lieutenant off to blow another bridge, and then gets this bunch of guys together in a jeep, throws all the medical supplies out of the jeep, and the medics are going, you can't do that. And he's going, well, we've got bridges to blow and we're running out of time. Because they land at kind of midnight. And the thing about this is Roosevelt wrote the war diary, the description of this. So there's the thing called the Pegasus Archive online, and the war diaries on there can be either dry as dust, or they can be personally authored by the by the person who did the thing. And Roosevelt's is one written by him. So you've got little details like our position was confirmed by a signpost at the crossroads. So no matter how lost they were, they went, well,
that'll do it.
Where the fuck are we? Oh, right, okay. All right, so we're on the Ronville-le-Mariquet road. So, I mean, after he's landed, on taking stock, we appeared to have a recce boat, a Mark II camouflette set, 4 500 pounds of plastic explosive, and 45 general Wade charges, which are for blowing bridges. Besides an adequate number of accessories, beehives, etc. HQ Link 68 set and Wine 18 set, so radio sets. We had only 6 trolleys, however, sufficient anyway to carry out some form of demolition on our 3 bridges. So they've 3 bridges to destroy. They've scraped the gear together. He gets some officers together, and he's got about 60 sappers. So they set off on this march. And then like I said, he realises he's running out of time. So he gets this jeep and these sappers together, and they drive to the bridge and on the Dive, and of course on the Troan River rather, which is the bridge he's decided he's going to blow. And he has to drive. The bridge is the other side of a village, and the village is full of Germans billeted there. And they're creeping up on they approach the bridge, and a sentry challenges them, and they leave. The sentry fires a shot, and they let him go. Then another sentry challenges them, and one of the guys shoots him dead with a Sten gun, and that wakes the entire village up.
Yes,
right. And they're all going. They're basically going, don't shoot him. He shoots him. It wakes the entire village up, and then what you have is quite literally the Germans who are billeted in the village, as they drive through the village in a jeep, coming down from their billets, pulling their trousers up, getting their rifles out,
taking pot shots.
Alarm! You know, guys set up a machine gun in the street, and Roosevelt drives them down. Right,
he just runs over them.
Yeah, and in all this kerfuffle, Sapper Peachy, who's sat in the trailer at the back with a Bren gun, is thrown from the jeep, and they don't go back to get Sapper Peachy. They don't recover him, and he never used to go to the regimental reunions as a result.
He's still been a bit sore about it.
Yeah, still really annoyed. For the rest of his life, wouldn't go. Right. So Roosevelt and his men, they get to the bridge, they blow the bridge at Troan, and then they disperse and turn tail and try and work their way back to the ridge to get back into Pearson's battalion area.
I mean, it's right out of Kelly's Hero.
It's completely and it really is blokes driving through a village. It's
Who dares
absolutely
wins.
extraordinary. And what's really interesting about it is I think what's really interesting about this is the British Army, and I know the airborne have got their own like way of looking at things, arguably, or their own esprit de corps, whatever you want to call it. It's supposed the British Army's supposed reputation is that you give people their orders, and then they'll try and they'll try and do what's in their orders, but that's it. There's no initiative, and there really is no initiative. It's sort of how the British armies, especially in Normandy, is characterised. They don't take the initiative. They sit back. They let stuff happen. And Roosevelt quite clearly here is the opposite. I mean, Airborne Legend says that when he got in the Jeep, he said, "I'm off to get my VC," and he's one of those people. He didn't get a VC, so it's all very well.
What did he get for it? Did you get anything? Get an MC?
I think I can't remember. I think he got an MC. It's quite the most extraordinary story.
Meanwhile, Brigadier James Hill is cursing his loss of tea bags and wandering off with Glenn the Alsatian that has parachuted down as well.
Yeah,
which is just absolutely amazing. But you're making a really, really good point about this, because one of the arguments about the kind of sort of putting the German troops on a pedestal is about that, they all had Auftrag tactic, which is mission command, which basically says, in a nutshell, it is about using your initiative.
Yeah.
But I remember looking through a sort of British training memorandum from, I think it was like March 1941, and it says, make your orders really simple. Just give them the objective and the means to take it, and then let them your subordinate commander get on with the job in hand, which is mission command. I mean, that is
the same thing. Yeah,
it's the same thing. And I think the interesting thing about it is that if you are a conscript troop, soldiers, and you don't really want to be there, and you're only even an officer or an ordinary soldier because it's the war and because you have to, you're not really interested in using initiative.
Yeah.
If you're in the airborne forces or the commandos or the SAS, you're there because you've volunteered to do so. So you're motivated, and if you're motivated, you'll use your initiative. And it's exactly the same with the Germans, actually.
Yeah.
So, if you're from an Ost battalion or a static infantry division or one of these really rubbish, undertrained, under-equipped divisions, you're going to do absolutely the bare minimum to get by and not get yourself shot. If you're in the sort of 12 Waffen SS Hitler Jugend, you're there because for the most part you've chosen to be, and you're kind of fanatical and you're up for it,
politically motivated,
and all those sort of things. So you're going to use your initiative more, and an initiative is nothing really. I don't think it's so much to do about training. It's about motivation.
Yeah. Well, Roosevelt was certainly motivated. I mean, I think it's what I like about it is it's sort of the opposite of the Pegasus Bridge story, which all goes according to plan and everything's peachy.
Yeah,
and this is him, and there's there's Breeze, and I think there's a guy called Jukes as well who do the same thing. They say they divvy up the bridges. Right, you're going for this one, you're going for this, and they blow all three bridges, and they do it by morning.
This is the amazing thing about the Allied airborne plan. For all the worry about it, and Air Chief Marshal Sir Trafford Lee Mallory having kind of the heebie-jeebies about it beforehand, he's the overall Allied air commander for the invasion, and he's sort of writing to Eisenhower the day before, going, "I really don't think we should have this. It's going to be a slaughter. I foretell death on the beach. Death on in the parachutes and all this kind of stuff." And Eisenhower quite rightly says, "I'm sorry, mate. We have to go with this. We absolutely need them." And despite the scattering, despite the kind of loss of Brigadier Hill's tea bags, despite lots and lots of cock-ups all the way along, both sets of airborne troops actually deliver everything they need to do, because they do secure the flanks, they do prevent the Germans from counterattacking from their sides, and those bridges are all destroyed on the Dives. The Orne Canal and the Caen Canal and the River Orne are captured, and the Americans get all their objectives too. I mean, it is it's a total success. And actually, talking Brigadier Hill, I mean, what he says beforehand, everyone has their different pep talks. I mean, what he says is don't be worried if chaos reigns. It undoubtedly will. And that's what you're trained for. You're trained to kind of think on your feet. I mean,
the thing is I think the Roosevelt story it's best told in his own words. I can't actually. This is the battle diary. So this is the 9 Troarn Bridge. So this is the action at Troarn. We set off down the road at a moderate pace with everybody ready with a Bren and several stens for any trouble. Just before the level crossing, we ran slap into a barbed wire knife rest roadblock. Right? One Boche fired a shot and then went off. It took 20 minutes of hard work with wire cutters before the Jeep was freed. So they tangled the axle and the barbed wire. We then proceeded on, leaving behind it transpired later, Sapper Moon. Right, so they'd obviously
Not realise.
Yeah,
well, it's
not realise.
dark, isn't it?
It's like, it's like when you count the kids on and off of a minibus, isn't it? 2 scouts were sent ahead to the crossroads, and there's a grid reference. As they arrived, a Boche soldier cycled across complete with rifle. On being dragged from his bicycle, he protested volubly, and we made the mistake of silencing him with a sten instead of a knife. The town was now getting roused, so we lost no time and everyone jumped aboard while I tried to make the best speed possible. As the total load was about £3,000, we only made 35 miles an hour. At the corner, here the fun started, as there seemed to be a Boche in every door.
That's just amazing.
In every doorway, shooting like mad. However, the boys got to work with their stens, and Sapper Peachy did good work as rear gunner with the Bren. What saved the day was the steep hill down the main street as the speed rose rapidly, and we careered from side to side of the road as the heavy trailer was swinging violently.
Oh, my God. I'll tell you what, I mean, I've driven around in a Jeep enough times, and they're not the most stable.
No, they're not. No, and not with, like, loads of hairy-ass paratroopers in them. On arrival at the bridge... We were chased out of the town by an MG-34, which fired tracer just above our heads. On arrival at the bridge, which was not held, we found Sapper Peachy and his Bren were missing. So he'd fallen off. 39 General Wade charges were immediately placed across the centre span. A Cortex lead connected up and the charge fired. The demolition was completely successful, the whole centre span being demolished, giving a gap of 15 to 20 feet. The time taken was about 5 minutes. I decided Troarn would not be a healthy spot to return to. So we drove the Jeep up a track due north towards Bure as far as possible and then ditched it. Lieutenant Breeze made a recce of Bure, which led him to believe it was occupied. It was now about 5 o'clock in the morning. The party therefore swam several streams south of Bure and took to the woods. A good deal of MG-42 fire from the direction of the road junction made me alter my plan, and I decided to make for Le Mesnil, which was reached at 1300 hours the next day.
That's absolutely incredible,
It's
isn't it?
incredible.
And it's so understated.
Yeah,
It's
that's where the fun
ridiculous.
started. Oh, God almighty. Anyway,
That's amazing.
I think those diaries are worth a look. It was 1 or 2 you end up written by the protagonist, rather than just sort of, we moved to this grid reference, there was some enemy, we put in an attack or whatever. Anyway, that's it for this week. Thanks, James.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We need to stop and do a little reconnaissance. Thanks for listening, and do please subscribe, give us a rating, and leave us a review. We need your ratings and reviews. And most importantly, send us your questions and stories. On Twitter, use the hashtag #WeHaveWays. See you soon.
Cheerio.